Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Historical Society, I want to welcome you to our museum and thank you for coming and supporting us. Before I introduce our speaker, I just want to take care of a couple of housekeeping. First of all, I ask you to silence your phones. And then I just need to point out that in the back of the room, we have an exit. If anything happens, and no nothing's going to happen, or the entrance that you came in. Those are our two emergency exits. And the other thing I just wanted to say is we have no fee to come in and see our talks and presentations, and we thank you for your generosity. Those of you who are able to give on your way in, we thank you. And if you're able on your way out to give, we also thank you. Tonight, I'm delighted to introduce a Revolutionary War expert, Duncan Oliver, and we're all excited and waiting to hear what he has to tell us.
I'm just trying the microphone now. Is that pretty good? Oh, yes. Okay. I was a high school principal for 21 years, so I really don't need a mic. They said that they were videoing, so they need a mic. 2 years ago, I was a pilgrim expert, and COVID killed us because I'm from Yarmouth. First of all, let me find out where all you people are from. Is everybody here from Eastham? Anybody that's not from Eastham? Where are you from?
Well played.
Okay, so. Okay, I know where you're from.
Yarmouth Port.
Yeah, God bless you. Weymouth, okay, good. Let me give you a little bit of background. When I first came to Cape Cod almost 25 years ago, I was just going to fish. Stripers were going to fear my coming. That was going to be my epitaph. So, utter disdain by the stripers led me to meet with a fellow named Jack Braginton-Smith. Now, you probably don't know what one person does. Jack ran Jack's Outback in Yarmouth. And if he liked you, he insulted you. But he had the best collection of primary sources of any individual on Cape Cod. And so Jack and I worked together. We wrote 2 books. He said we were going to write 25, but 2 books was enough. We wrote Shore Whaling, the only book on shore whaling on Cape Cod. And if you ever see it, don't get the 207. That's History Press, and I can't say anymore because they're taping it. But the 2002 is the good one. We also did a thing on Port of the Day. And because of what we did, we get asked to speak on. Jack said there are 2 groups you never speak to. You never speak to senior citizens after they've eaten. And you never speak after a church ham and beans supper. That was Jack. I learned a lot from Jack. And I learned just how important primary sources are down here too, because I'm from Easton, up near Brockton, Massachusetts, but we had a small condo here. When we retired, I knew that it was too small. I didn't put in the second part, and somebody challenged me. Why didn't you? The second part of why I said it was too small, we bought a house. The second part was we would have killed each other. And she would have been the killer, and I would have been the killee. And so I sat with that very well. Okay. But anyway, about 3 years ago, right as 2020 was getting washed away, we started 250th Revolution Research Committee of Yarmouth and Dennis. And the reason that we did that is because at the time of the revolution. Dennis was part of this, and you really couldn't split it apart. If you're wondering about notes, I am scared of anybody who talks without notes, because I don't know when they're done. I don't know if they're following a trail. You can tell when I'm half done when I switch to that page. Our big thing was, we thought Cape Cod was underrepresented. And we thought that half the history that was told about Cape Cod was wrong. Yesterday, just so you know that things happen in other places than Eastham, we had the chairman of Revolution 250, you saw that pin he gave it to me. And we had the Boston Tea Party executive director come down from their t-shirts to mark the grave in Yarmouth. I think we have two, we haven't proven a second, of one of the people that threw tea in the Boston Harbor, who was buried in Yarmouth. So we are beginning to get these kind of things. Okay. Don't believe anything that Edward Road Snow does, okay? He makes a heck of a story, but it ain't always true. The same is true of William Hall. I mean, we had liars back then. William Hall applied for a pension in 1832, because that's when you could apply, and that's when a whole lot of private sources came available. And he said he was a sergeant helping get guns to Washington and Boston. He would have been 12 at that time. But he must have heard some of the stories. So we're tracking each of his stories, and we'll talk about them. But if you've ever seen the book Sand in Their Shoes, okay. The rest of it's pretty good. Say that part, don't look at that part. Tonight I'm going to tell you about 3 books that I think if you want to read about this kind of history, you have to go to. But let me go prior to the war and tell you about the first. And the first is the Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party is only next year, the 250th, December 1773. How many know that the British East India Company didn't own any of the books? Most of the ones were owned by Nantucket, Cape Cod, and Boston people. So, matter of fact, we actually have a couple of the sailors that were on one of the Tea Party boats that was broken into. 4 boats were supposed to come to Boston, loaded with tea. 3 loaded with tea, the 4th one with about 60 cases of tea and 300 streetlights. The one with the streetlights never made it. It wrecked 2 miles south of Race Point. That was the William. Okay, if you want a history of the William and what happened, the book is 1774. And the lady's name is Mary Beth Noir, okay? My email address is Oliver26756 at Comcast.net. If you've got anything you want, let me know, or let Patty know, and I'll make sure you get it, so don't worry about it. But she did a great job research. We found out a whole lot about the Tea Party that took place on Cape Cod. You all know Mohawk Indians got on board, threw the tea cases over. How much damage did they do to the boats? Do you know the 3 boats that made it in? Well, no, I can't say 0. They broke a lock. That's all they did. And the next day, some people came back and fixed it. So there was no damage. It just, they heaved the cases of tea. The tea down here was another story. There were 56 cases of tea that weren't damaged. Provincetown people, well-fleet people, Truro people, hauled them to Provincetown. They found a fishing boat that would take them to Castle Island, and those actually made it. The other 4 damaged cases were going to be sold or paid to the people that helped. Well, that caused kind of a stir. It caused so much of a stir in Eastham that in January they had a town meeting. You know what that Eastham town meeting? Oh, we need somebody to write that story because it's only a year and a half away. January there was a town meeting and they voted it's okay to sell a tea because there's no tax on the tea that we have. Not everyone in Eastham, like in February, they had another town meeting and say, absolutely not. You can't. March, they had another town meeting saying there were a lot of phonies at the February town meeting that didn't really belong there, and they voted to sell the tea. So Eastham was right smack in the middle with Wellfleet about should we sell the tea, should we not? And there is a fellow named Greenhow who was in charge of it all, who was from Wellfleet. I'm going to be picking up, over here. All of you people, every town has a nickname. Do you know what the people are called in Eastham?
East Hamsters.
You're going to talk about
East Hamsters.
they're called brassmen. You know why they're called brassmen? Huh? No, not because of it's asparagus. They were the brassmen. And Jack used to say, you have to say something about each town. Well, there you go, that's yours. It was tough in Harwich, because when I spoke last in Harwich, you know what Harwich people are called? Back then, hair ladies. And I said to Jack, where did hair ladies come from? Jack said to me, tell them it was the girls' basketball team. Tell the Townsend, Jack, right? The Townsend, okay. Harwich has a lot of things going against it. I hate to say it, I love Harwich. But they had a minister that moved there to preach in Harwich. And he said, when you bury me in Brewster when I die, God will never find me in Harwich. So you have to understand Brewster and Harwich are kind of the same. Okay, back to the grass here in the tea party. So you have big history that you have to write up because Yarmouth isn't going to do it for you regarding pre-revolution. Now that wasn't the only thing in pre-revolution. How about your liberty pole? Did Eastham have a liberty pole? No, good, you were all correct. There were only really 4 liberty poles on Cape Cod. Not bragging, Ty Cobb said, it's not bragging if it's true. And so when you hear me brag, it's true. Yarmouth had 2 of them. The other 2, Barnstable, had major problems with it, and Sandwich got cut down. The best one was on Martha's Vineyard. Now, we don't consider Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket as Cape Cod, or they buy our license plates rather than having their own. So they had such a nice liberty pole at Holmes Hole. Do you know what Holmes Hole was? What do you do? Vineyard Haven.
What's a liberty pole?
Whoa, good, Sons of Liberty put poles up in towns where they could gather and have their rallies and their meetings. And in Boston, they had a liberty tree that the British town. But it was kind of a rallying place for those who today we call patriots. Back then, some of them were actually thugs, but where they gathered. Tories did everything they could to people who didn't want to be separated from England to get rid of those liberty poles. But anyway, the Liberty pole that was put up on a hill at Holmes Hole, the British wanted, and one of the British warships sailed into their harbor because they needed a spot, and they said, notice I talk already with a Cape Cod accent, spa, S-P-A-R, the R is silent, we add an H to it. Okay, yeah, you know, like car, good.
Huh? Beer.
Beer.
Yeah. What you drink? Beer.
Oh, beer, yeah. He made it a two-syllable word, too, so, who people drink beer? Good. Okay, now you're beginning to talk like, okay, and if anybody says you talk funny, say to them, no, you talk funny, we were here first. And so the change goes to them. Okay, anyway, the Liberty pole, supposedly 3 girls from Holmes Hole put explosives at the base of it and blew it down so the British couldn't use it for their ship. Well, there was a myth about that. And in the 1900s, one of the writers from the Vinny Gazette said, didn't happen. It was a DAR myth. Well, they did more research and they found out that these girls actually applied for pensions because they were part of the war effort. And more research, and today, yes, there was a Liberty pole. It did get blown down, and it was by 3 young ladies that knocked it down so the British didn't get it. So it's history that we ought to keep going on and talk about. Closing courthouses, I'm not even mentioning that. That's up to Barnstable to do. But when you drive along 6A, right after you go through Barnstable Village, Hills of Cape Cod, everybody know? No, I won't ask you a question. Hills of Cape Cod is on the right. That used to be the county courthouse. And Patriots closed that so that it couldn't be used because they were no longer choosing juries of peers. The sheriff was choosing the juries, and they didn't think that'd be fair. Okay. That's all pre-war. When the war came, we used to teach, and I used to teach Cape Cod history. I used to teach it at Dennis-Yarmouth at their adult education, 6 classes in the evening, in the winter, get in and stay warm. It cost $15 for all 6 classes. And people said, how come so cheap? I said, because I want everybody to be able to go. I actually had a couple of them up to me and whisper, if we only take one handout, do we both have to pay? Hey, let me tell you, you need to know that there are poor people on Cape Cod. And I said, no, you don't have to pay either, you have to pay. You help hand out the things, and you can do it for free. And so they sat in a nice warm auditorium for 2.5 hours every Wednesday night. It's kind of sad that they have this, but anyway, when I taught the American Revolution, before we started all of this, I used to say that when Paul Revere went riding north up to Lexington, the British are coming, the British are coming. The guy came riding down the Cape saying, the British have already come, the British have already come. That isn't true. Yeah, it sounded like a good story, but I didn't know. I sounded just like Edward Roosevelt. What actually happened, and we're just going to take Yarmouth. I don't know what happened to your militia, but 131 men from the Yarmouth militia marched north to Marsh Street. Marsh Street. Maybe they got tired, that's what they, something happened. No, we found out that the British had 100 men stationed in Marsh Street. And when they heard that all of these militia were moving up against them, they picked them up and brought them back to Boston, so that there was never a fight there. But there was a reason to go to Marshfield. Never written up. Totally unknown. But a reason that Cape Cod needs to push its own history. Now, it wasn't just Yarmouth people that went there, Yarmouth and Dennis. When I say Yarmouth, understand, Dennis was part of this for 1793. And when they divided Yarmouth, said, oh, we want the grass, we want to feed our cows and all this other stuff. Let them have the sand. Nobody will ever use the sand. So that's why Dennis has all of my speeches today. So here we have the first flare. Can't take credit for anything on Bunker Hill. It was basically people from north of Boston. But when George Washington came, they were bringing Ticonderoga cannon. And when the cannon got close, Washington said, I need men. So 81 men from Yarmouth, end of February, marched north, because that's the only way to get there then. You couldn't take a sea, the British owned the sea. Marched north to Dorchester Heights. Now, when you ride in from the Southeast Expressway, if you're the driver, you look straight ahead, please. Because that's a scary, scary road. The rest of you look around for a height, and you'll see it off on the right. That's Dorchester Heights, and it overlooks Boston, which at the time was a peninsula. They were worried about putting cannon up there because they were afraid the British were going to attack them very quickly. Okay, and this is the second book that I want you to read. Now, this book's name is The American Miracle by Michael Medved, M-E-D-V-E-D. And it talks about God's hand in helping to move things. Now, skip the first chapter, it's about the Pilgrims. And he said that there was something about God helping the Mayflower turn around and get them back, and when they get down to the Chatham shoals and all of those. The real story on that, and I'll tell you, and it's passed down, is that there was a ship that wrecked in the 19th century up in Chatham. One of the survivors was swimming to shore, and he looked and he saw some of the people on shore all set to steal everything that was off their boat. He said, where am I? And they said, you're in Chatham, which was Chatham before the railroads got here. Okay. And he said, oh God, he turned around and he swam back out. Okay. That's what I like to say about Chatham. But I can say that I'm not from Chatham. Okay? So don't read that first chapter. But the second chapter talks about building Dorchester Heights in the redoubts. The night that they decided to do it, to put the cannons in place, fog was all over Boston. You couldn't see 10 feet, but up 30 feet, no fog, clear moonless night, and warm. And they were able to dig in redoubts so that by morning, when the British and the fog cleared, the British looked, oh my God, all of these cannon overlooking Boston. And the British said, we've got to do something about this. Let's get the troop transports, let's get all set to go. And a wicked storm, another good Massachusetts wicked. I'll have several more, all clean. Here. A wicked storm came up, blew two of the transports ashore. Freezing rain, ice, the redoubts were all slippery, you couldn't get up them. The British said, we can't stay here. We don't want Boston to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, so on that day, we're gonna leave. And that's why Boston kids today have no school on St. Patrick's Day. Because it's evacuation day. It has nothing to do with St. Patrick's. But the British left, and they agreed that there would be no burning of the city, which they could have done very, and they were allowed to go. Rather unusual that none of this happened. Yarmouth knows about this because our colonel wrote 5 letters to his wife. He couldn't spell, but we have transcripts of all of these 5. And he talks about things they worry about. They worry about smallpox. Smallpox just flowed through all of these. There was no smallpox during Dorchester Heights. Wow. You know what the other big disease was that really wiped out Revolutionary War soldiers? Scurvy. 15% of the people in Philadelphia that were in the Philadelphia hospital were there because of scurvy. And this is when they knew what scurvy was all about and what you had to do. The British Navy was already using something. Remember what they were using? Lime. That's why the British are known as limeys today, because the sucking the lime was the way to stop scurvy. So, really, death was a major problem. This same man talks about how Washington escaped from Long Island, and he never should have. The fog came in out of nowhere, and the British fleet couldn't see him, and he was able to get his men to row across. Great section on Lincoln, too. I happen to love Lincoln. There are amazing people that have made themselves, and Abraham Lincoln is one of them. But Michael Medved is somebody you want to go. Okay, I am moving to the second page. We had battles here on Cape Cod. The British had to feed their soldiers. And remember that Michael Hall I told you about that told all kinds of stories. He talked about fighting the British at Great Island. Now, every town has a great island, but there's only one really great island. That's in Yarmouth. Okay? And that's the big point that sticks out across from. You don't agree with me, do you? Boy, I saw that. Oh, you're reading into my wife. But we had great island at the time was where farmers put their animals. You probably, hey, there's great islands everywhere. There's a flax pond everywhere. Have you not ever noticed that? Sure. We are so compartmentalized that Dennis has 5 main streets. Guess how many centers there are in Dennis? 5. Yeah, Yarmouth has 3 Willow Streets. Guess how many zip codes we have in Yarmouth? So it's okay. We didn't get standardized until the railroad came. And that's another whole story down the road. Standardized time and standardized travel, bridges, all of those things. I'll talk about bridges a little bit later on. Okay, let's get to our soldiers. After Boston, things headed south. And you know that Washington had to spend time with Ellie Forge. You know that, will you? Not yeah, but okay. God, he had to learn something. 1,000 to 1,200 men died there that winter out of his army of about 10,000. 8 of them that died were from Yarmouth. Now, if you take the true number of men that should have died with what Yarmouth sent, it should have been 2 to 3. So how do you figure that? I had a person tell me when I brought that up at a different conversation, Yarmouth boys weren't healthy. Not really, it's just we had more people there per group than others. I don't know how many Eastham people were there. There must have been some. But Valley Forge was an important thing for Yarmouth. Okay. The real thing I want to talk about happens in 1778. I'm not going to be, I'll be 90 when that happens, so I'm not going to be here. I really don't. My wife said, yes, you will, only the good die young. But I wasn't. Oh, she lived, hey, look, 62 years, and we've loved every minute of it. Yeah, because we sometimes can separate. And all the men here know that there are 4 words you can always use. Yes, dear. I'm sorry. Right? Nobody disagrees, okay? And that's the easy way. Let's talk about the sunset. Once again, you can't look at Edward Road snow. He said the Somerset went a lot of times into Provincetown. It never went into Provincetown. Not according to the laws. And there's a good book that uses primary sources that you will want to read if you want to read about that. And that's Marjorie Hubble Gibson, a Cod girl who wrote the HMS Somerset. She's from Philadelphia. Wonderfully researched and on everything except watching the boys to Boston. She does a really good job at it. Okay. Snow says, yes, they were in Provincetown. I'll tell you who was in Provincetown. Nelson. Ever heard that name in English name? Oh, yeah. Later on at Trafalgar, the Battle of Trafalgar. Okay, I don't believe in telling you apocryphal stories, so we'll come.
Yeah, that's go.
Yeah. They'll still here, but I can't find the source where I heard it. But apparently, what you all know, Nelson was mortally wounded off of Spain. And he said, don't bury me in Spain, take me back to England. They put him in a keg of rum, which is what, that's how you say it. They got all the way back to England. And somebody looked and there was a peg in the bottom of the rum. And when they opened the keg, it was 3/4 gone. And he said to one of the sailors, hey, how did this happen? No, nothing, sir. No penalty. How does that? Well, we drank it. They said, well, how did it taste? Had a lot of body. That's a bad story. Look, let's get away from problems. That is a good story. You gotta mention it. You're talking about Provincetown. I mean, Provincetown so bad that they called Truro, somebody from Truro. No, I guess not. Dangerfield, because it was close to Provincetown. Wow, you should have seen some of the things Jack and I found when we were looking for shore whaling things that were true about Provincetown. Oh, no. Okay, that's a different time. Let's get back to this. Okay.
A great island.
Okay. Anyway, 480 men were rescued off of the Somerset when it went down, coming in for the first time. Only 21 drowned. That's how far up on the beach they got pushed. They did themselves a favor by throwing all the cannon off. And the spars and all of this, but it allowed the waves to wash it even further forward. And by washing it even further forward, it allowed some of the things to be saved. Paul Revere later was in charge of getting those cannon, and they got about a dozen of them, and putting them at Castle Island to help protect Boston Harbor. So the Somerset ended up being kind of a protection. This was November 2nd and a storm. We know what the weather was like because a fellow from Sandwich had kept a diary. And you know, everybody when they keep a diary tells you what the weather is almost every day. So we know about what it's like. In Sandwich, okay, they get a little bit better, but they're still okay. So we know that this ship came ashore, 64 guns, just over 500 men. 480 of them were able to get off by the 4th of November. Now, here's the scary part, and even the Mass Historical Society believes it. I cannot believe it. They said these 480 men, including British Marines, were guarded by 2 to 3 unarmed Truro militia. We got to research that. No, Truro's got to research that. They may be good, but they can't be that good. The British Navy would never allow 480 men to be rounded up by 3 unarmed, and I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, unarmed militia. And watching them for a couple of days. On the 6th of November, they decided they had to get them to Boston. I couldn't put them in a boat. Some people, we won't mention who, said they took all of the officers and sailed them to Boston. They did. Ori, who's the captain, O-U-R-R-I, actually wrote a letter saying, I marched to Boston just like the rest of the people. So 480 British enemy started in Truro and had to get to Boston. Okay, I'm going to give you a challenge. The next time you come toward heaven, in other words, come to earth, then when you go beyond, okay, I want you to find a way to get from here to where you could get across the Cape before they dug the canal. What roads? Remember, no bridges were really built until the War of 1812. Now, the road, I'm going to tell you, there were 3 places where they would have to ford streams. Where was the first one you know of? I heard somebody say Jeremiah's got it. You said it. You know what Jeremiah's got was? Good. I know. There's a nice plaque right there by Stop and Shop in Orleans that talks about it. They had to get across that, so they would have been wet there. Second place, Paynes Creek. When you take the Paynes Creek Road, because you can't go down the other, there's a where the alewives and all those things swimming in, that was marsh. They had to walk around that way. We know that they had to cross one. I'm going to give you 4, not 3. They had to cross at White's Brook. Okay, let me tell you how you know where this is. You're going to see a sign, Easton Pizzas by Evan, 362-7977. Okay. You have one that I know that number?
You like pizza?
I like pizza. Yeah, I make good pizza. Right by that, White's Brook used to go under. But there was a ford there, and we know that because just beyond, before you get to Union Street, when Union Street hits 6th, I'm listening. So he's still there. There's a little stone marker that says B, Boston, 1729. So we know that that's where the stage was at that time. And the 4th place is Shawn Stream coming down in Sandwich. Now, you've got to get from Yarmouth around and try to figure out where those British soldiers went. Okay. They spent 3 nights getting from Truro to Sandwich. So the night of the 6th, the night of the 7th, the night of the 8th. We know that they spent a night in Yarmouth because we have a bill from one of the taverns for the 4 midshipmen to sleep there and to get fed for the 4 midshipmen off of them. What about the others? When you're done, I'm going to tell you. I'll tell you what we used. This is what we call incidental collection. It's from soldiers and sailors in the 1890s. She knows. They tried to write all of the things of the Revolutionary War. 17 volumes, longhand, complete with muster rolls. You're going to see Jack Braginton's writings in there too, but that's okay. We figured if the soldiers charged for 2 nights, and about 70 Yarmouth militiamen did, there had to be an overnight stay someplace in Yarmouth, and we think it was near the Barnstable border. If they only did 1 night, they probably just marched through. Now, that happens to be an Eastham soldier for 1 day service. I think, can't prove it, so don't quote me, I think they spent a night on the Eastham Orleans line. That's the only way they sent it. Another one in Harwich, now, of all of the towns on that northern road, all but one put in money. Barnstable wouldn't pay, so people had to do it individually. So this town, Barnstable, which town do you think charged the most? I'll give you a hint. Begins with E and ends with M. 92 pounds. That's a lot of money. Yeah, I wrote down some of the others. Harwich didn't do too badly. For a place you wouldn't want to get buried, 78 pounds. Yarmouth only charged 19 pounds. And Sandwich, 39. And we know they spent nights in Sandwich and Yarmouth. Does that mean that we had more money? I don't know. We only know about the Yarmouth portion. We know that 70 men from 3 militia companies, not 3 unarmed men, like 12, guarded these 480 prisoners as they went through Yarmouth. Eastham needs to find out who guarded these people and what path they took all the way through. Yeah. As does Harwich. Dennis is okay because they're part of us. They're known as the East Precinct back then. Barnstable will probably get it. Barnstable was the only town in the Cape Cod that didn't vote for independence ahead of time. They had a lot of tourists. No, but that, hey, it's okay. Look, as long as you believe it, that's fine. And Sandwich has the diarist that tells us what happened when they got to Sandwich. He said they guarded 250 on Plymouth. Now, he doesn't say whether they were split, 250 and less than 250, went to the second group, what happened. But we need to get there. That's 480 British soldiers on Cape Cod during the American Revolution, and we don't know what happened. That was what got us started talking about the American Revolution. And that's what you people have to do too. And don't give me, I'm too old. How many people here are older than 84? There you go. That's me. And I'm not the oldest person in our group. And when we were doing 2020, we had old people too. Fran Robinson, you remember Fran? He was 92. Like, I'm sorry, he is 92. He was a little bit younger than that. Okay. So what have we got for primary sources? If you have a diary, wonderful. If you have family lore, wonderful. If you have Edward Roystow done over, because he will make a story film. I don't blame him, he's selling books. And he's from Brewster, okay? I think that nobody from Brewster here, so I can say that. Somebody from Brewster, you would know. When I go to Brewster. Yeah. The only time Brewster wanted help from somebody else is when the British during the War of 1812 said they were going to bombard all of this salt, all this salt works. You know what everybody else said? Then hey, whatever happens, Brewster paid. Wow. Okay, I don't blame them. I would too. You don't want to lose the salt works. Oh, forgot to tell you how we paid for all of this stuff for the Somerset. I'm still okay. You said it'd be 45 minutes. I didn't start right at 7, I was able to open up things at all. They paid for it by selling off stuff from the Somerset. Cannon and equipment, they could get into it every low tide. And one of the things that they got, a guy named Sears, anybody named Sears here? Must be. God, he can't go to any place, he can't go to Sears. Well, he's from Dennis, he would have been Yarmouth then. 2 years later, they got the bilge pump. And you know what he used it for? To pump salt water up onto his salt works. And that's what made the salt works successful on Cape Cod. Hey, so the Somerset actually had some good things help us with. They never fired a shot at Yarmouth. Poor old Falmouth got whacked by everybody going by. So we can understand Falmouth. Falmouth, the nicest thing Falmouth ever did is change their name. You know what their Indian name was before it was Falmouth? Succanesset. Can you imagine people were around saying, what's a Nesset? Hey, you guys were Nasset. That's not bad. I don't know why you changed that. And why it is an Eastham rather than Eastham, like Chatham. But during the course of our research, we found divers, we found soldiers and sailors, we found Bray's letters, we found a whole lot of things. And when Jack and I were looking, I just listed a couple of things just so you would know. Gosmond, everybody knows Gosmond. When you ever see Cape Cod 1602, that's not dyslexia, that's true. Because he was first here on the Elizabethan Islands. You know what he was looking for? Yes, you do. Sassafras. You know why? You know what sassafras was a cure for back then? Syphilis. Yeah. That was one of the things they were looking for. We weren't Cape Cod to begin with. That happens later. Cape Ann is the really lucky one because John Smith named that Cape Travaganza, named for the lady in Spain that saved him when he was captured. But they changed it to Ann, which sounds much nicer if you're from that part of Massachusetts. Okay. Lord Cornbury, early 1700s, the British governor of New York, was a cross-dresser. Surprise, they had those back then too. Yeah. In Sandwich, John Ellis was going to marry a young lady. They were caught. Okay, they were caught. The penalty for that before marriage was whipping. She was the daughter of the selectman who helped found the town. She was wanted to watch him get whipped. You think anybody played the nepotism card and maybe saves him again? Perhaps. How about the fellow who brought whaleboats to Cape Cod? Anybody know who that was? Oh, I love this part. This is, but I could say anything. Yeah. Okay. The fellow's name was Jacobus Lopa. He changed it to sound more English, but to Jacob. He was from the Netherlands, and he was from Well, no. Afterwards, he came down here. You know what his claim to fame on the lower Cape was? He got a girl in trouble. Okay, we found that out. Same guy. You know about William Hall line. You know the Liberty Pole in Martha's Vineyard, the DAR plot. In the 19th century, you know, Cape Cod wasn't thought of very highly in the 19th century. You know that? You didn't? Okay. They wrote terrible things about us. Some of the travel brochures, one of them said, Cape Cod women are flat-chested because of the hard work they do while their husbands are at sea. I don't think that's so bad. Easy to tell washer shorts. Right? But they would say, hey, you want to read something about Thoreau writing about Cape Cod and what he said about Dennis? What he said, no, actually it was Emerson, said about Chatham. They use fog for shade. They don't want lighthouses because ships won't work there and they'll lose their income. That's Emerson. But they go back and they have these big Lyceum things and they tell stories like that. You know? And our own Elisha Doan, who was a shipbuilder and head of the temperance group in Yarmouth, had a big shipyard and paid his men and wrong. So it's all this history on Cape Cod. That's how we use it and how we tell it through. But I can tell you this much. We aren't 5% done on the Revolutionary War. And we need all of your help. And with the archives you have here, if you know the archives, the Boston State Archives, somebody and say, I'm going to the archives. And they have all of the militia rules and all of these things. You need those. You have to have that, or you won't be able to tell the truth. And the worst thing about history is if it isn't told honestly. You can't rewrite history. And you'll be doomed to repeat it if you don't know what it was. I don't know if that was one whole thing because there wasn't anybody here from Truro. That's kind of a shame. Joe Bailey, have you ever heard of that name? One of the soldiers that well, one of the people that came off of the Somerset was a black slave. Then the Somerset picked up on its way north from probably North Carolina. Joe Bailey took it. What happened to this guy? I don't know. Or nobody from Barnstable, I don't know how I already asked that. There was a Barnstable sailor on board the Somerset. His name was Daniel Bassett. And he died at age 22, the February before. What was a Barnstable guy doing on a British mail? That's a story Barnstable has to dig out if we're going to have correct history. People, next year we start the 250th. We don't have a lot of time, so get your pencils out. Go ahead.
Is it worth going to the British side of the archives and see what the soldiers have written? And, you know, I know through my genealogy, sometimes that, you know, you have to go to the other side. So the British soldiers write down what happened as they went through. I mean, is it was it over in England somewhere or?
Nobody has, I'll be honest with you, Marjorie, whatever.
Because they were great at doing that.
She didn't find anything except this one diary. Now, that one diary is kind of interesting. It's at Sturgis. And incidentally, Sturgis Library is one heck of a library.
We have a copy in the office here too.
You have, wow, that's good. Because you got to transcribe, and I only knew a few places that it was. Okay. I saw the hours and on the way out. We'll notice who doesn't look to see what your hours are so that they come and read it. that would give you a whole lot of history about your town that actually happened. Gotta do that. We've gotta get the truth. I would try anything I could. I'll be honest with you, how people sometimes write about the enemy. Although in Easton, not Eastham, Easton, the longest serving soldier in the American Revolution was a British soldier who jumped and switched sides. So, you never know. But the first thing I would do is I'd try soldiers and sailors. And since it's 17 volumes, and you can almost digitally look at it, I might write in the town Eastham, one word, and see what comes up. I did that for Yarmouth and found out 47 strikes for people with Yarmouth and the Sunset. Now, we had 70 men there, but 47 is not bad for a start. Now, any place you can get research. I would also ask DAR, SAR, how they research today. Because they do great research and have to have primary source proof. Because they got something. Oh, hey, Eastham, you're wonderful. I love poking fun at other towns. Understand, I love you dearly. There's no place I'd rather live than Cape Cod. Yarmouth first, because we chose it. But you guys have wonderful history. I heard a little rumor that perhaps they weren't sure that first thing down the beach was really first thing down the beach, but that's okay. That maybe it was just a little bit someplace else. Hey, that's 1620. That's long. Love all the things you do and love how you're involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Duncan. That was very entertaining. I really appreciate your coming. Next week, we have another presentation by what we call our own wilding. So for those of you who've seen Don before, I know you want to come back. And those of you who've never seen Don before, you're in for a treat. So thank you all again.
Hey, he's a great historian. On over here. Gotta pick him up. And I'll tell you, Nan, I gotta remember the lady. Was here, huh?
Turner. Nan Turner.
No, that might be a real name, Nan, but she was from Sharon. Came down and spent a lot of time and wrote things down there. That's where I first found out about the Outback house.
What was her name? What?
Walter. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, she spent 17 summers in.
Yeah. And her husband sold us oil when we were growing up, so. No, sometimes it's honest way, but hey, that's great history out there. Don't lose it. Don't lose it. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.